guys, welcome to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing our unit study on Charlotte's Web. For the most part, we used Moving Beyond the Page, but I also had this little literature guide as well that I'll be sharing. All right, so if you watched my previous video, you saw that I kind of shared about Moving Beyond the Page and that we were going to start using it. So Charlotte's Web was our first unit that we've completed, and I decided to do its own video on Charlotte's Web. I'm going to show you guys some pages from Moving Beyond the Page, some activities we did, what we liked, what we kind of changed up, and things like that. All right, so Moving Beyond the Page, this is for ages 7 to 9, and if you use their curriculum as a whole, this is actually Concept 3, Unit 2, and what I mean by that is if you look at the back, they sell these in like year bundles, or individually, obviously. And so this is from the 3rd cycle. So if my 2nd grader was going through this, she would have done all of these first before this, but we already had Charlotte's Web as planned for a unit study, so I just figured I would start here. So with their concepts, how I think it's supposed to work and how I've read it's supposed to work is, so here's Charlotte's Web Unit 2. It should correspond with this either science or social studies unit, which would have been the water cycle. So we did do the water cycle with it, and I'm making my own video on that. So if you're interested on the water cycle unit, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out when that video comes out. But back to Charlotte's Web, I'm going to tell you point blank, I saw zero correlation between Charlotte's Web and the water cycle. I think they were both fine and I liked both of them, but there was no point that I saw for you to do them together. So when our days were getting extra long, I would have rather just done them separately, one at a time, to be honest. Now, right before this cycle, there was the life cycle study that you would do with the book Poppy. This was all about life cycles. So I guess I'm like, okay, well, they would have already learned about life cycles and this is reinforcing that, but it just didn't make sense to me. And I've gotten feedback that it didn't make sense to other people because most of the time the units are supposed to go hand in hand together, okay? So example, like the science unit Amazing Weather goes with the tornado book study. That makes sense, but whatever. So that's just my 2 cents. Either way, we did like both of the units. You don't have to do them together. There was no benefit to doing them together. Let's kind of talk about just this unit. If you're curious how Moving Beyond the Page works, go check out my other video. I'm not going to make this one super long to kind of explain all those things. In this lesson, in this unit, there were 7 lessons, but some of the lessons were supposed to be done over a 2-day period. So this took us about 4 weeks to get through, and we do school 3 times a week. So 12 school days is what it took us to get through this. Now, what I will say is I'm using this with a 2nd grader and a 4th grader at the same time. And as far as the reading, because obviously we're reading Charlotte's Web, how it worked for us is we listened to the audiobook, but then both of my daughters have their own copy of Charlotte's Web, and so they're following along. Now, that's not always feasible. I have no idea why we have 2 copies of Charlotte's Web. I think we might have had one and I just decided to buy the other. Most of the time, if we have a copy of one of the books, then I'll get a 2nd copy from the library or get 2 copies from the library. But we already had it. So they each had their own copy and we listened to the audiobook. Some kids can listen to the audiobook and draw or take notes. What works best for my kids is following along in the book themselves, but listening to it via audio. And then that takes that off my plate. I don't have to do the reading for it. So that is how we listen to it. I will say though, when you have each of these lessons, it was asking you to read at least 3 of the chapters at a time. So that was about listening to the audiobook, about 30 minutes of reading, and then you had the activities to do. My 2nd grader is a very advanced reader, so she can keep up. She is reading 6th grade level books. She has no comprehension issues. That is her strongest area, is reading. And then obviously my 4th grader is higher than 2nd grade as well. If you have a normal 2nd grader or just kid who, maybe isn't that into reading, I would recommend going slower with the reading. I would only do 1 or 2 chapters per lesson or day, just so you can really focus on those. So what I'm finding with Moving Beyond the Page is I like it as far as a spine to kind of guide you, and it has good activity suggestions, but don't be afraid to alter it to fit your homeschool. I know that's not always easy because you're like, well, I bought this curriculum, it should tell me exactly what to do. And it does, but if you try to follow this, you're gonna be overwhelmed. It's a lot of work with all the reading and all the activities. So to me, I don't think that was the point of it. I think it gives you all the stuff you need, but then feel free to alter it to your homeschool. You're going to be more successful that way. All right, so how each lesson works is, like I said, they normally have about 3 chapters they need to read, and then there's always discussion questions. So there's about 10 discussion questions, between like 7 to 10 for all 3 chapters. So you would have 10 questions on the 3 chapters you just read, and they're kind of a mixture of that. So sometimes I just read them the questions and they gave me the answer aloud. You have the answers in your teacher's guide. If it's like a black and white answer, if it's their opinion, you're just gonna have to use your judgment. But then there's also a printable page where you can have your child write in their answers. So there were days where I didn't have time to go through their discussion questions, so I would just print it out for them. They would complete their discussion questions, and then I would look over them later. So you have those 2 options for all the reading. So that is something I've seen consistent in all the Moving Beyond the Page language arts lessons. For Charlotte's Web, your activity 1 is a plot flowchart. You actually use this throughout the entire unit. So each of these little boxes is for 1 chapter. So what we would do is we would listen to chapter 1, and then I would pause the audiobook, and then they would fill this out. All it is a little what happened in chapter 1. It's tiny. They can't write much. It's just main idea what happened in chapter 1. And this is all the chapters in the book. So this is something they filled out the entire unit. They also filled out this character trait card, character trait paper. It was just for 3 of the characters in the book, so it's not for all the characters, but in chapter 1 you would write a word to describe this character in that chapter. So same thing, we would do our plot flow chart, and then we would come do our character traits. Now again, I'm doing this with a 2nd and 4th grader. After a while, they're like, I don't know any more words. And they were using like happy, nice, friendly. So what I did is I just Googled character traits and I found this little printout. If I can re-find it, I'll link it at the bottom of this video. And so there's synonyms for character traits. So instead of them saying nice, there's kind of a list of more words. So they had that. They had positive character traits, negative character traits, and then neutral character traits. So this is something that was a good resource, a good reference. And then 2, sometimes they would pick words that didn't make sense. And so that was good for me to kind of reinforce it, look up some vocabulary. And so I would definitely recommend getting some sort of like character trait printout for them because they're going to keep using the same words. I mean, it's a story, the characters are who they are. It's going to be hard for them to think outside the box unless they have a good resource. So those 2 activities were done every lesson. So what was good is, you know, the first lesson they were like, what am I doing? But then we just got in a habit of filling those out every time, and it was really cool for them to look back and remember everything and then how the characters kind of progressed over time. So you do your reading, you do your character traits, you do your plot summary, you do your discussion questions. That's already a lot of work. And that's why I said some of the like lesson 1 would be broken up over 2 days. And so we would do our reading on one day, and then we would do a lot of the activities on the 2nd day is how I kind of made it work. So we weren't spending so much time on it and not skipping a bunch of the activities, but then each day you have like 3 or 4 recommended activities, and these range from vocabulary to poems to research. And so I really had to get in a good habit of, before we were doing the lesson, I as the teacher needed to go over the activities, pick which ones we're doing, and have that ready to go. Because trying to do it mid-lesson is just frustrating for yourself, frustrating for your kids. So I would pre-read them and say, okay, we're gonna do this activity on with this day and this lesson. We're not gonna do this activity at all, or maybe this activity we're gonna move to the next day. So keep in mind, they give you tons of activities. You will be overwhelmed if you try to do it all. I'm just throwing it out there. So I don't know if the intention was for you to do them all. And if you do want to do them at all, do it in your own time frame. Don't feel like you have to box this in like 3 weeks. I just don't think that anyone's going to benefit from that, or it won't be enjoyable at least. Some of the activities, so they had to write a poem. So this is a spider poem. They give them a little bit of a direction on it. Okay. So then there's sometimes too, they give you, okay, this is the activity, but there's 2 options for the activity. One is a little bit more gentler of an approach, and one is a little bit more advanced. So for us, because I was using this with a 2nd and a 4th grader, my 2nd grader would do option 1, and my 2nd grader would, or my 4th grader would do option 2. So here's an example. So this one's senses and writing. They were writing a paragraph. Use descriptive language that appeals to all 5 sentences. Focus your writing on word choice, and then it gives them like a word bank to use. So that was option 1. Option 2, same directions, but they have to make up their own word bank. And so it just makes it a little bit more difficult for an older child. So I do like that flexibility, that there's multiple options to make the activity a little bit more challenging or a little bit more gentle if you need that. It does obviously consider itself a language arts curriculum, and so in my teacher's guide I would have activity 2, adverbs, and then it's going to tell me how to teach adverbs. Now what you have to keep in mind is this is meant to be a year-long curriculum doing all of the units in their order. What I feel like is they're building on these concepts. So you know, we're just now seeing adverbs in Charlotte's Web. That doesn't mean that adverbs have not been taught previously in their other units. We just didn't do those units because we're just doing this unit study. So it does give you kind of an overview, and I think it gives you a pretty good overview. This one was pretty fun because it lined up really well with our IEW writing. We were actually learning about LY adverbs like the day before, and then we got to this lesson. So when things just like match up, that was super awesome. But if we hadn't had that writing lesson, I probably would have needed to kind of venture outside of this and do a little like a YouTube video or something on Teacher Pay Teachers to just solidify more what adverbs are. And then here's kind of the worksheet. So like find the adverbs, make your own adverb. You know, what's the difference between comparative and superlative? This one we had to look up. I mean, yes, it told me, but we needed more reinforcement. So this is something that I felt we needed more detail in, and so we had to find other resources for that. Here's another activity, spider life cycle. Like I said, I have no idea why they say that this one goes with the water cycle when there are so many activities tied into the life cycle, which I really like. If we would have done this with the life cycle unit, I feel like it would have made so much more sense. But for whatever reason, that's not how they had them. So if you haven't done Moving Beyond the Page and you're like, oh, I really want to do a science and a reading, I would do Life Cycle and Charlotte's Web. It just made more sense to me. So anyways, they still got to learn the life cycle. We obviously went through this together. There was some other activities specifically on the life cycle. So like they had to fill out this chart. So all the characters in the book, what life cycle stages did we see them at as the book progressed? So that was really cool. They had some practice doing interesting sentences. So it gave them an example, 2 paragraphs, one written more interesting, one written not. So it gave them examples, then it had them do it on their own. And what I liked is it broke up the paragraph like one sentence by one. So we had a fun time making some good, interesting sentences. There's another research one, spiders around the world. Cut out the spider, go research it. And so that's kind of tying in more science, go research spiders. We could have paused right here and did a whole little mini unit on spiders. We could have had books and all of that. We've already done a bug study. We did From the Good and the Beautiful. their arthropod unit. So we did enough studying spiders. I didn't need them to be Googling pictures of spiders. So that just but fun. So this, like, it really does tie in, and it does allow you to really branch off and expand. That's why I say, if you're looking for this to just be you everything to do, you do everything in it and that's it. I don't see it that way. I see these as like a spine and kind of a guide for you to branch off, to maybe teach something you wouldn't have thought to teach. But I definitely think this needs some extra things added and some things skipped, and that's just make it your own is kind of what I'm saying. I didn't go through obviously all of the activities. There's tons. Like I said, there's 3 to 4 per actual lesson. At the end, there's always a final project. So in Charlotte's Web, it was a book review. They wanted your child to write a book review, and they give you a grading rubric so you can grade it. It gives them instructions, you know, some ideas. So like this one, write your rough draft. What should you include in your paragraphs, which is really helpful for those learning to write. It gave them another option to maybe do it in like an advertisement. So create an advertisement as your book review. It gives them some steps. It gives another grading rubric of things for you to look through. So kind of like that. We did not choose to do this end of unit project because I wanted to do something a little bit more hands-on. We actually made dioramas. So we had some old knowledge crate boxes that we cut up, and my kids just used a bunch of different supplies, and they made little scenes from Charlotte's Web. And so that is their year-end project, what they did. And the details they put in here, so like the rope swing, of course it's gonna fall apart. The rope swing that's here, the little stool, those are details that were important in the book, and this is only one of my daughters. Whoa, I'm dropping it. So that is how I graded it, right? They spent over a week making these. If you follow me on Instagram, I kind of showed the process, so it was really fun. I'm telling you right now, I had like the highest level of anxiety because my entire kitchen table was just a mess during this time. And I'm not one to just like, oh, we'll leave it for the week while they're working on it. No, I had to clean it up each day and redo it all. And so projects like this do not happen often because I just cannot handle messes like that. But they had fun. They loved doing it. Now we can put them in our homeschool room, and they really, really enjoyed that. I did have this. This is what I bought originally for our unit study, and so in here is kind of where I got those little characters and stuff from. I just made copies. In here, there's things like vocabulary, there's discussion questions. So if you're looking to go a little bit more, you can definitely pick up. There's tons of things on Charlotte's Web, so just kind of how I use this too with it. But that is it. That was our Charlotte's Web unit study. So my kids loved it. We finished up watching the Charlotte's Web movie, which they all loved, and surprisingly it's pretty close to the book, and so there was no disappointment there. It was actually really good quality, and we all enjoyed watching it. It is about 2 hours though, so just plan for that. But all in all, we met our goal. I've been wanting to do Charlotte's Web. We learned a lot, we had fun, and for using the moving beyond the page, I really like it, and I'm going to continue using it with the caveat is I do change a lot and add a lot to it. So I use them as my spine, and that is how you're going to see me probably using these units going forward. And so I will be sure to share my tips, tricks, extra resources, and all of that. That's the end of the video. If you have questions, comments, leave them down below. If you want to see more from Moving Beyond the Page, make sure you give this video that thumbs up. Make sure that you are subscribed, and we will chat soon. Bye, guys.